Okay, so this is a long overdue video to talk about a lot of people's favorite generation 911, the 997, which is really two 911s in one. So the 997 generation 911s were produced between 2004 and 2011. And they are a huge improvement over the 996 generation that came before it. But what was really interesting about the 997 was it was the first 911 that benefited from the Cayenne. That is, the Cayenne sold so well, Porsche became a very wealthy company and were able to reinvest that money back into sports cars. And that really shows in the 997, which is so well put together compared to the 996. So a lot of people talk about what the 997 generation introduced to the 911, but it was also the last of many great things. And that is why the 997 is so sought after and such a lovely car to own. Because it was the last 997 to have so many cool things, including a manual handbrake. They went to electronic after this, hydraulic steering. They went to electric steering after this. Engine access, you can actually open the tail of this car and see the engine. And of course this was the last generation that had a manual transmission in the Turbo and the Turbo S. Sadly now you can only get the PDK, which is a fantastic transmission, but it's certainly pretty cool to drive a Turbo or Turbo S with a manual transmission. But of course the 997.1 is not without its problems. The engine is a bit of a carryover from the 996. So still had some of the Ims Bearing Issues, most of which should be fixed by now, so you're pretty safe to drive a Generation 1, which are the real bargain cars, which are like this car here, which are beautiful to drive, quite modern inside still. But the real joy of the 997 is actually the value. You can get a 997 for anywhere between 30,000 up to 100,000 depending on condition, spec and so forth. But for a model like this, a Carrera S, you can get these for $35,000 to $45,000. And people think it's a brand new 911 because it looks modern. Obviously the shape doesn't change that much. They drive like a modern 911. They're incredibly powerful and they sound amazing. And they're just well put together. There's none of the creaking and body flexing that you got in the 996s. That's all fixed here in the 997. And so they're a real bargain. But there is a big difference, of course, between the 997.1 and the 997.2. In 2008, they refreshed the 997 again with the 997.2. And it was the largest, most comprehensive change to a 911 refresh that they've ever made. It was basically a brand new car. All that money pouring in from the Cayenne sales allowed them to reinvest and rebuild the 997. So it wasn't just a new engine. Yes, the engine changed to a direct injection engine, but the transmission went to first PDK transmission. They completely changed the drivetrain, the suspension, even the PCM, you name it. In fact, every single body panel except for two got changed. And every single part of the electronics, even the headlights, the steering wheel, the mirrors, everything got changed out for the 997.2. So a lot of people felt that it was a brand new car, even though unless you're a Porsche expert, you're not going to notice the difference from the outside. And that is why the 997.2 is valued a lot higher than the one, because it doesn't have the problematic engine and it's basically a whole new model. If you're looking to get into a 911 that drives beautifully and sounds amazing, and you only have $35,000 to $45,000, the Dot 1 is worth considering. The biggest downside to the Dot 1 997, of course, is the engine. A lot of people were afraid of this engine because they still had some of these Ims Bearing Issues. But really, that was a fraction of a percentage of cars that actually had that problem. And now, 10 years later, if the car was going to have the Ims Bearing problem, it would have already happened. And most of the cars had that replaced, or the people that maintain these cars well, you never have that problem. Okay, I think we've all had enough of me yelling over the wind. Let's take a closer look at the differences between the Dot 1 and the Dot 2. As I said, it was practically a whole new car under the skin. New suspension, new running gear, new transmission, new engine, new electronics, new pretty much everything. But on the surface, they're pretty hard to tell. But if you look for certain clues, you can tell the difference. From the rear, you can tell because of the LED lights. At the front, you can tell from, once again, the lights. They're a dual HDI light on the Dot 2, or it's a single on the Dot 1. Same with the running lights, they're also LED on the front. The front end is a slightly different shape as well. On the inside, you can tell from the new steering wheel, which actually got carried over the 991.1. The mirrors are slightly different. A new PCM, which looks very similar to the one in the 991.1, which includes a touchscreen and for the first time ever hard disk navigation. And of course PDK. Now the engine was the biggest change, of course. The engine, well, it bumped the power only 25 horsepower, but the big difference was in the delivery of torque. Because of that direct injection engine, you got a lot more torque at the top end of the rev range. Over 5,500 RPM, you really get a kick in the pants. Otherwise, on the interior, both models look much the same, apart from, of course, the rather dated PCM on the Dot 1. The rest of the interior is actually pretty modern and of very high quality. The other thing you notice, of course, as I mentioned before, is the steering wheel's the slightly older model, but otherwise they are more or less identical on the inside. They even have the fancy cup holders that you see in the modern 911s as well. Yeah, the interiors are pretty high quality on the 997s. A big improvement over the 996s. And being that we're driving cabriolets today, we should have a look at how the roof operates. The cabriolet models get a few extra buttons. They get the buttons for operating the roof down here by the park brake. They also get an extra button in the window controls because you have a little rear quarter window as well with the cabriolet. But the cabriolets have proven to be pretty reliable for the 997s. The only thing to watch for is wear around the folds. So look for wear around the folds, especially cars over 20,000 miles, because these roofs are very expensive to replace. But generally, if they've been looked after, they can last up to 50 or 60,000 miles, no trouble at all, depending on how often it's open and closed. So there you have it, the 997. It is a bit of a performance bargain if you're looking to get into a pretty modern 911 for fairly reasonable money. They're well worth a look. Obviously, most people want the Dot 2s because of the extra performance and the extra technology, but these days the Dot 1s are well worth looking at as well, particularly with the manual transmission. I would recommend the manual transmission on either series. The PDK, while it always was a faster car, it's really starting to show its age on the 997. I would try and get a manual if you can. It is just a more reliable transmission. Anyway, I wanted to thank Stephen and Seth for lending me their cars for this review. I also had a little bit of trouble with William, but I didn't put him in a seatbelt, so he's trying to climb in the front. And I'll try and follow up this review shortly with a Turbo 997 review because they're a very special car as well. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye then. And if you're wondering where to acquire the ridiculous t-shirts that I wear in my videos, they're all here in my store, all your favorites, including offensive stamps and my rapid dry towels as well. Yes, Nick Murray t-shirts, being a little inappropriate since 2016.